So, Father Oliver, you are from the Philippines.
Yes.
What is the ecological situation in Philippines now? Are there any problems from the climate crisis over there?
So first, let me introduce first the Philippines. No, the Philippines is an archipelago. We have about 7,000, more than 7,000 islands. It's located in Southeast Asia, and because of that, because of its position and its geography, it's very much affected by any small changes in the climate. As you have heard maybe in the news also, and you have seen, this past years we have experienced a lot of typhoons. Of course, certainly the Philippines, even before, we usually have typhoon season because of the monsoons. But in the past years, these typhoons are really, we call them, they're classified as super typhoons. And it costs a lot of lives as well, livelihood. And that's the very reason why Pope Francis even visited the Philippines, not to celebrate any jubilee, but to feel close to those who were victims of super typhoons. So we have a lot of ecological problems in the Philippines as well. As a rainforest ecosystem, we also have problems regarding deforestation, illegal logging, illegal trade of animals, for example. So biodiversity is at stake as well. And aside from that, mining also is a big problem because mining produces a lot of waste. And this waste contaminates the fresh water, and it in the end provides also a lot of problems in terms of the health of the people, especially in the small communities living where mining is happening. So with this many problems in ecology, certainly when Pope Francis wrote about the Laudato Si some 7 years ago in 2015, the response of the church in the Philippines and the Society of the Philippines was very much felt, first locally and then even internationally. And that's the current situation now in the Philippines.
Okay, thank you. Let's just dive right into the main theme of our episode, which is it a sin to live an unsustainable life? Or not to recycle? Is it a sin to pollute the environment in any other way? Could you comment on that?
It's a very interesting question. Well, for one, in order to answer the question, we must first ask ourselves, how do we understand the concept of sin and unsustainable lifestyle? Maybe let's go back to our basic catechism, what sin is. Sin, as we understand it, is a breakdown in our relationship, first of all, with God. And then because of that, it breaks down also our relationship with ourselves and with others, and even with the environment. Because the concept of sin is a breakdown in the good relationship, that peaceful relationship that exists among us. So that's one. But we have to understand also that sin could only be there if we are able to practice two of our unique faculties as a human person, and that is our intellect and will. I'm talking about grave sin. Because we have to understand that in order for us to say that I've committed a sin, first of all, we have to know that it is a sin. No, that's intellect. Do we know that it is right, or do we know that it is wrong? And that's the reason why it is only the human person who could sin. We don't find any animal. For example, we have our favorite dog. It bit us. And then you cannot say, "Hey dog, you've sinned." Of course not, because it was an instinct. He bit us maybe because we're trying to steal his food. But intellect means that we know, as a human person, we know what is right and what is wrong. And at the same time, after knowing what is right and what is wrong, we have also the question of the second faculty of the human person, that is our will, freedom. Are we free to do it? Because certainly, for example, if we are just forced to do something out of our without our freedom, without our consent, then that could not also be considered a sin. For example, when you are forced to steal something, not because you wanted to, but you are coerced, or otherwise somebody would kill you if you do not steal. And then that now, in terms of our understanding, did he really or did she commit a sin? Then the culpability would be lessened. No, it's not that it is not right or wrong. Of course, we know that stealing is wrong, but the amount of culpability, because you lack freedom, is lessened. Of course, so that's how we look at sin objectively and subjectively. On the other hand, we also have to be clear with our understanding of unsustainable and the positive one, sustainable lifestyle. Of course, most of the time we hear it a lot in the news. We've read about it in magazines, in the newspaper. But what does it simply mean? No, sustainable lifestyle simply means living, for me, reading Laudato Si Pope Francis, living a simple way of life. No, going back to the basics, because I think that is one of the most challenging um, problem that we have in this society now. Pope Francis indicated in his Laudato Si this throwaway culture. No, because of the ultra consumeristic and capitalistic society that we are living now, most of the time we have a lot of things and we want to gain a lot of things, but we really don't need them. No? And so, Pope Francis in his Laudato Si also asked for us to think about really what do we really need? No, why are we here? Uh, and how should I use these things that I have for a sustainable lifestyle? Of course, there would be other things to consider as regards to that. So going back to the main question, is it a sin to live an unsustainable lifestyle? Then the simple answer, the direct answer to that would be yes, because an unsustainable lifestyle breaks down our relationship with God first, who is the creator, our relationship with each other, realizing that we share our common home, which is the earth. And so it's not just, okay, I want to use this, I don't care about what happens to you. Now, as I have said in the Philippines, for example, I just want to have a good mining company so that I could generate wealth for myself. So I don't care what will happen to those people living um, near the mining fields. So it breaks down our relationship with each other, fueled by greed also. And at the same time, it breaks down also our relationship with ourselves. Most of the time, we might not be thinking of it, but we also hurt ourselves when we live an unsustainable lifestyle. No? We know that from science, we know it from medicine. No? Some of the diseases that we have now, most of the diseases that we have, like for example, diabetes, high blood pressure, this could also be a result of living an unsustainable lifestyle. When we eat too much, for example, no unhealthy food, when we do not find time to exercise, no, and exercise, one form of exercising is going to nature, having a good walk, maybe, going to the lake. This also breaks down our relationship in ourselves if we are not able to live a sustainable lifestyle, no. And finally, of course, as I have told you, certainly, obviously, when we live an unsustainable lifestyle, we break our relationship with nature. No, we see nature something to be used only, rather than something that we should be grateful for because we are part of it. We are part of it.
Okay. I found it very interesting when you were talking about throwaway culture as a sort of, I don't know what to call it, something that is happening, in our society, something that exists as a thing in our society. And, for a sin to occur, you need freedom and intelligence. Could that be the throwaway culture of our society? Could that be considered that people who live in this culture don't really have either the freedom or the intelligence or both?
I think when it comes to our society now, you know, for example, information is very much available. No? Of course, there's also the problem of some fake news. That's one of the realities that we have to face. But I think in terms of information, our society is well informed. So it's not a problem for me, I think, of a lack of information. We know about the problems. The problem is maybe sometimes we do not want to accept it, or we don't want to listen to it. No, we don't want to listen to the earth, to the cry of the earth about what is happening. So I guess that limits we cannot say, I don't know that it is a sin because I don't know. No. And ignorance could also be, how do you call this one? We could overcome ignorance by reading. For example, when Pope Francis wrote Laudato Si, it is addressed not only to us Catholics, but it's addressed to all men and women of goodwill. And why? Because he wants to engage in a dialogue. And by entering into a dialogue, we learn, we get informed. And with this knowledge now, we gain, we are able to exercise intellect, we become more human. At the same time, your question about the will, are we not free? I guess also not. We cannot also say, no, I'm not free, because we realize that as we grow, when is your first communion, for example? Why is first communion not given when we are smaller, when we were baptized, when we were infants? No, we get first communion when we're 7, because we say that at the age of 7, we have already reached that age of reason. And we are able to exercise our freedom. So when I do something, it is not because of instinct, just like the animals would do, but it is because I have deliberated upon it, and after deliberation, I did it. Either, for example, when it comes to the environment, either I cut the tree, and I know that it's a reserve area, but still I did cut those trees. Why? Because I want to gain money. You realize also that in terms of freedom, it's very interesting. When in terms of our exercise of freedom, we are always attracted to something that is good. Now, I think the problem is sometimes we think that something that is evil is good. For example, money. We think that it's good because certainly when we have money, we could do certain things. We could have certain things. But in order to get that, sometimes we sacrifice our values. We sacrifice our relationships just to be able to get something that we think that is good. In the long run, we realize that it is not really good, because even though I get, for example, a lot of money, in the end, I suffer also. I suffer because I am destroying the environment where I live, and I am destroying the place also where other people live. So it's all connected, and I think that's what Pope Francis is also trying to say. This concept of integral ecology. And it's not just something ecology, something seen as something that is different, separate from us, but something that we are part of. So those two things. So in terms of the throwaway culture, I think the throwaway culture is something that we have chosen, and that we know. We are human beings. We are intellectual beings. We could easily know and see. And with that, I think this invitation of Pope Francis to enter into dialogue, and to really reflect on what we are doing now and how we are living things is a good invitation for all.
That's brilliant, yes. And when you were talking about how integral ecology is into our lives, do you think it affects some, I don't know, other aspects of our lives, like how countries interact, like whether that affects world peace, or how we interact with God, or how we understand his mercy?
Very interesting that question, because in the encyclical Laudato Si, Pope Francis also presented the figure of Saint Francis of Assisi. You know that he selected his name Francis because of the influence also of Francis of Assisi. And interesting, Saint Francis of Assisi is the patron saint not only of ecology but of peace as well. So when we see that ecology and peace are not something different, but they are very much interconnected. Why? Because when we learn how to take care of ecology, when we realize that we are living in a common home, and then we also would try to strive for peace in terms of relationship among the countries. Certainly, nowadays, this is something that is put into test, and it's something that we see. We are affected by it. And if I would read it well, you see, why does it happen in this simultaneously? We are having the ecological crisis, and we are also having crisis in terms of peace. Why? Because they are interconnected. A person who does not know how to take care of the environment would also find it difficult to take care of other people. So that sense of care, that value, that virtue of being able to see not only what I need, not only what I want, but also to see what would others need, what would others want, which is better for all and not just for me. That would help us resolve, I think, the problem that we are facing now, both in ecology and the problem of international peace.
Great. And how about God's mercy then in the context of our relationship with nature?
God's mercy is an interesting question, especially that we are here in Vilnius,
Yes.
the city of mercy. Remember, 2015, Pope Francis published Laudato Si. 2016, the next year, he would declare a Jubilee Year of Mercy. And I think it's not coincidental that he did that. He did that because for him to begin to start this, what he calls ecological conversion, we first have to ask first God's mercy. To recognize that we have sinned. To recognize that there is something that we did in the past that was not right. That goes back again to our main question: is it a sin to live an unsustainable lifestyle? Because from the very beginning, if we don't recognize that we have sinned, if we just say, no, I'm doing what is right, it doesn't really affect anyone, no, it's just me. And then we cannot begin that process of conversion. Conversion in the Greek word is metanoia. No, metanoia means a changing of the mind. And when we realize that there is something that I did that was not right, and then that is the very moment that I could begin to transform. Because if we try to fool ourselves that no, everything is viscous gere, no, everything is good, everything, no, nothing is all these, for example, global warming, they don't really exist, it's just political, it's just all this. The point there is, unless we first face the facts and be humble enough to see, yeah, I've contributed also to the problem that we are having now, we cannot move forward. But it's not just I'm accepting that I did something wrong, but we also need to ask for forgiveness. So that is where I think, first of all, God's mercy enters into. That God tells us, that I am here. I know that at times you might have um you might have done something that's not right, but um you could be better. And I think that's what mercy gives us, another chance. And God is not just a God of second chances, no, but of many chances. Because certainly, even if I look at my lifestyle, for example, personally, every day there is a point that I could say I could do better. in this, in terms of relating with the nature especially. So that one. So God's mercy is important because that gives us an impetus. No, it helps us to move forward. No, when we ask God's mercy, then we are also able to ask, for example, forgiveness from nature, forgiveness from one another, forgiveness also for ourselves. Because at the end of the day, all of us, I think deep down inside, we just want to live a good life, a meaningful life, a happy life. But most of the time, we think that we could only live that good life if I could steal from someone. No, I could be happy if others are sad. But at the end of the day, we realize that true happiness could only be there when we also give happiness to others.
Exactly. So we want to fix all the relationships that we've
Okay.
broken, right, with our unsustainable lifestyles. Okay, so you've been mentioning Laudato Si, ecological conversion, metanoia. So what is this thing, and is it necessary for every Catholic? Is it actually necessary, or is it just something to, consider and think about and maybe read about, but do we have to implement it in our lives and seek this conversion?
Since it already comes from Pope Francis himself, no? So one, it gives you the sense of urgency and importance of the message about care for the environment, this ecological conversion, the concept of integral ecology. So when it comes to the necessity, I think, especially now, knowing what is happening around the world, let's open our eyes and hearts. And and if we are really open to God, we realize that it's not just a matter of, anyways, it's some Philippines is an island that is very far. But if we really have that concern for others, and if we really want to live our Christian lives well, fully, I remember the words of Jesus in the gospel. No, I came that you may have life and have it to the full. No, Christian life is not living a half life. Christian life is about living a full life. And it means making decisions. It means doing actions. But it also means having a deep spirituality united with God, united with Jesus, in order to make the world a better place. It's nice that we are celebrating now the Easter season. And one of the readings of Easter comes from the book of Revelation. And Jesus would say, no, behold, I make all things new. There is a new heavens and a new earth. And the new heavens and the new earth, although it is eschatological, begins now to create a new society, to create a new ecology, begins with our individual action, and taken together becomes a social action that changes the world. And we see that the possibility, it's not anymore could it be possible. No, we see expressions of that even from young people, no, who are very much aware of what is happening around them, and not just being aware of it, but doing something about it. But what I like is, it's not just, okay, I do something, because it could just be reduced to activism, but also going deeper into spirituality, going deeper into how do I become a better Christian, a better Catholic, by taking care of the environment. I think that is not a difficult question, because to become a better Christian, a better Catholic, means to be concerned and to take care of the environment, because by doing that, I am establishing my relationship with God. Because remember, creation is God's first revelation. Even before He sent His Son, He created the world. And because of that, even those who did not know Jesus, those who lived before Jesus, they were able to have a concept of God. And why? Because they saw God's creation. God reveals Himself in creation. How beautiful it is, no? When we look in as on a sunrise, when we at the end of the day, after we've done a lot of work, when we see the stars at night, no, when we are able to interact in the forest with the trees, And why do we feel that? Why do we feel that sense of transcendence, that we go beyond ourselves? Why? Because God reveals himself also in creation. So if you want to have a deeper connection with God, also be connected with nature. And being connected with nature means taking care of it as well. And then as a consequence of it also, by taking care of nature, we take care of others, we take care of ourselves.
Okay, so we've been talking about this ecological conversion and why it's important, but how can one convert ecologically? What does it mean for a person to convert ecologically?
Conversion begins with an examination of conscience, an examination of consciousness. Now, this year or last year, right? Last year, the Jesuits, and not only the Jesuits, but the church celebrated the conversion of St. Ignatius of Loyola, 500 years, 1521. Um, there was that Battle of Pamplona. And one of the gifts that he has given, not only to the Jesuits, but also to the church and to the world, is that examen of conscience. So any conversion begins with an examination of how one is living his life or her life. No? What are the things that I'm doing good now? What are the things that I'm not doing good? Where could I improve? Where do I feel closer to God? Where do I feel farther away from God? So that could also be asked in terms of how we relate with nature. You know, what are the things that I am doing in order to protect and to take care of nature? On the other hand, the other question is, what are the things that I am doing or not doing? Remember, sin also is both. No, the sin of doing things and the sin of not doing things also. If I am, for example, anyways, I am living in my own world, I don't care what happens to the other, then that could also be a sin of omission that I do not do, even if I have the possibility to do something, to act on something. And so, first is an examination of conscience, and that requires a lot of truth and a lot of humility. And then the second is asking for the grace of God also. That's the point where we connected it with mercy. Because any conversion is not just a human act, it is also, first of all, God's grace. We could only be converted if we work with God's grace. And that is why we should also try to listen, no? Put it into prayer. No? What should be the best thing to do? Because sometimes the question is, do we even put these questions into prayer as well? Or we just act or not act based on what we like and what we don't like. So the second is also that one, no, being open to God's grace. And finally, after the discernment process, to be resolute to do something. Now have your resolutions. And resolutions, you don't have to have a lot of resolutions, because certainly at the end of the day, just like New Year resolutions, every year when there's a new year, I would exercise more, I would read more. But then if you have not concrete, abstract resolutions, then it would just be resolution, and after some time, after a month, you forget about it. What I advise is make some small but concrete actions that you could practice daily in your daily life, for example. May it be daily, may it be monthly, maybe yearly, but something that you could really practice. Of course, when you read through a lot of articles already, there are a lot of proposals. My only concern is sometimes with so many proposals, we get lost. Now, I want to do this, to do that, but at the end of the day, we are not able to do anything at all. So what I would advise is get to know yourself more also. For example, what are the things really that you are concerned about? What are your passions? What drives you? For example, before this podcast, we were talking to each other, and I've heard that you're studying biology, for example, and avian biology, to that your interest. So for example, so it's the birds, so something to do with the birds, something to take care about them. Some people might be interested in flowers. Some people would be interested, for example, of in kayaking or something, so something with water. So know also your passions, your desires, because God also talks to us in our passions and desires. Remember, we are God's creatures. He made us. He knows us. He knows what we love. He knows what we don't love. And use that also in order to have some concrete actions in order to take care of the environment and to begin this ecological conversion.
Okay, so someone goes through the steps and this in the end discovers their own, passions, desires, and starts working, towards their own ecological conversion through them. But are there some criteria for when this conversion is done? Like, how can a person know when they have ecologically converted, or is this not how it works?
Conversion is always a lifelong process. I think we would finally, end our journey of conversion when we are already 6 feet below the ground, no? When we become part again of the ground that we have to take care of, that sometimes we don't take care of. So it's an everyday process because there is always something in us that could be improved. There is always something that we could do better. There is always, every day is a chance to respond to God's invitation to be a better steward of creation. And as you have mentioned also, so this process is just the individual process of conversion. But remember, the individual process of conversion is useless if there is no social conversion that will happen as well. So it means that we need also to engage with each other. It's not just, I am good and I am the only one good. No, if you're really good, then you would also be concerned of making others better as well. So I think that process is a lifelong process, but so we don't need to say, okay, I'm finished, I've reached it, I'm already good. No, it's always a lifelong process, but at the same time we should also thank God for the little improvements that we see in our lives and in the lives of the society. For example, we see that in today's society, there are more renewable energies being used, for example. Oh, that's a good sign. We have to affirm also ourselves that we have gone a long way also, that there are new technologies that are being developed also. I know some young people, for example, have really this resolution of not using single-use plastics, for example. Even in the Philippines, for example, some of our provinces, some of the places already banned the use of single-use plastics. So even that one, we have to affirm those initiatives by the government, by people, which are already signs of this ecological conversion. So there are signs of hope also. No, it's not something that we should be ludna about, that we should be sad about, but there are also some signs of hope and some signs that no, we can have this conversion, but it will not end. No, it will not.
Of course, yes, that's great. But as much as we're talking about the positives of Laudato Si, could there be a danger to ideologize the message of this encyclical?
Certainly. And if you remember, 7 years ago, even before the Laudato Si was published, there were already a lot of hype about it. No? And it could be ideologized. No? People could mistake it or misread it also. And that is why Pope Francis, aware of that also, starts with deepening the spirituality. Because if you detach it with the spirituality, if you detach it with your understanding of who the human person is in relationship with God, and then it could just be activism. No, it could just be reduced to how do you call protests and all this. I'm not saying that they're not good. They are also necessary in order to further some policies, in order to for some of the governments to listen to the voice of the people. But at the same time, we have to be careful because many also would like to ride into it in order just to gain something from it. For example, a concrete example is after the Laudato Si was published, there are a lot of organic um, products that are in the market. But if you realize what Pope Francis is trying to critique about our consumeristic and capitalistic society, it's not about putting into market more products that are organic, which at the end I don't know how organic they are. Sometimes they just say it's organic, but actually, it's just riding on to the Laudato Si movement, and it costs more, and all this. So what I would like to say is we have to be careful also with this. No? And remember, as Jesus said in the gospel, no, we are known, the tree is known by the fruits. So let's see. If the fruit is good, then we know that the tree is good. But the fruits also of ideologies would always be bad because it is only concerned about one's own needs rather than being concerned with others. And we have to be careful with that as well.
Okay, and would you say that this is the main difference between the message of Laudato Si and other secular green movements?
I'm not saying that the other secular green movements are doing right or wrong, but what I'm saying is when Pope Francis published Laudato Si, he puts it in the level of spirituality also. He gives it a fuller dimension that we have to realize that going green is not just a secular act, but going green is a spiritual act as well. It means that we should see it in terms of how we are relating in our relationship with God and with each other. Because for example, if I work for the environment, but at the end of the day, I end up hating my brother and my sister. So how is that connection between ecology and peace expressed? No? When we condemn people because you're doing what is wrong, no? Then instead of encouraging them to have this conversion together, then we are just trying to make ourselves self-righteous. I am doing what is right. You are doing what is wrong. And that, I think, defeats the purpose. Goes back to the sense of mercy. Because mercy means that we are able also to extend forgiveness to others. Let's work together. No, it's not just, of course, to say one is right and wrong is important as well. But at the same time, to say that, but we have a chance to work together and to make this place a better place, to make this world a better place, it's always there. It's always there.
That's beautiful. Okay. Now I'm just going to think for a little bit of how to transition to this next question.
How do you this one? For me, rather than answering the question, what I would like the listeners to also understand, it should create more questions in their mind. Ayaw. Because that is where ecological conversion begins. When we have questions, when we realize that not everything is just black and white, but that there is a possibility of finding proper answers. And in this point, I really am very happy about Laudato Si because Pope Francis, who is a chemist also, because some people are saying, oh, why would Pope Francis write about it? He's just a priest. No, he's just a pope. He doesn't know about it. And then afterwards, people are saying, no, but he was a chemist before. So he really understands what he is trying to say. In his regard with science, he said, science is not something that is diverse or divorced from faith. Science actually could help us. So the more we listen to science, to right science, okay, not fabricated science, to right science or those pseudoscience, we have to be careful also with that, then it could give us also a better view of what is happening now and finding new solutions. I know some people in the scientific world who are really working hand in hand together in order to to, for example, to create some renewable sources of energy, no? And I know also some who are researching the effects, for example, of what is happening now, the climate change, the quality of life that people are in at the moment because of the pollution that we are having in the environment. So science also, we should not forget that science gives us help as well.
Yes, that is a very good point. And I was thinking some people might take what you were saying, too far and say that this Laudato Si comes only from science and not from God. But did Jesus say anything about ecology and taking care of the environment?
It's interesting. Directly, maybe Jesus did not say, "Okay, take care of the trees," or use renewable sources of energy. He did not. But certainly, if we read the Gospels, we realize that when he teaches in his parables, he would usually use examples from nature. So what does it tell us? First, it tells us that he's very much connected and aware of what is happening in nature. And because of that, he was able to use them as examples, as parables. And at the same time, he is able to fulfill it by bringing it further, by situating us into that relationship with God through nature. You see, why would he use them as example, these parables? For example, the kingdom of God is like, for example, it's like a farmer who sows. So why would he use that? He's using that because he knows that we could understand God by understanding nature. Um, and that is quite interesting. And if we do not take care of nature, the question is now, how could we understand God if there is no instrument, if there is no medium through which we could reach Him as well? So that's quite interesting. You were talking about Jesus, but let me bring you to some books earlier than the Gospels. Let's go back to the first book, Genesis, because certainly if we want to understand Laudato Si, if we want to understand our relationship with nature, we have to go back further and we have to go back to creation itself. That's the first story of the Bible, that God is a creator. He created everything. And when he created everything, he crowned his creation by creating us, human persons. And he placed it there in creation because what is our role? No, who are we in relationship with all of God's creature? We are its stewards, not its owners. And sometimes that is where the word playing like gods enters. No? At times we think that because we are stewards, we are owners. No, we are mere stewards. Creation is entrusted to the human person so that we could be able to cultivate it. No? The first man is a gardener. That's his first job. He was taking care of the garden with his wife. Now, unfortunately, and now you see the effect of sin. The question of, is it a sin to live an unsustainable lifestyle? Let's go back to the story of the fall of man. When man fell because they disobeyed God's commandment, they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The effect of that is, of course, death. But they did not die immediately, but it was a process of dying. And how does this process of dying begin? This process of dying first begin by that separation from God. They hid themselves from God. They were afraid because they were naked, remember? And God was walking and searching for them and saying, "Where are you?" It's an interesting question because where are you? Sometimes I even think, so does it mean God did not know where they are? I think not. God, who is all-knowing, omniscient, certainly knows where they are. But I think that question is not really for God, but for the human person, for us. Where are you? Do we really know where we are? where do we stand in terms of our relationship with God, in terms of our relationship with each other, in terms with our relationship with the world? So where are you? And then afterwards, so when they engaged already in that dialogue with God, and God said, so you have disobeyed me, and the effects came. No? And interesting, the last effect, when he was already saying the effect that it will have to Adam, he would say, you would find it hard to be in relationship with the world. You have to till it, but it would not bring forth fruits, no, but instead thorns and thistles. So even the world became separated from man. And that from that moment on, that struggle between God's creation and man began, because instead of becoming stewards, no, we could be also that possibility of destroying God's creation. And we see that. How many of God's creation have we destroyed already in the past? And we realize that we are not gods. We cannot bring them back again. No, species that were lost would be forever lost. And that is the call, no, to please let us save this endangered species. And so it's interesting that one of the effects of sin, that first sin of man, is that separation from the earth, that we become detached from it, no, that and the earth would not respond to us. Before, I think it was easy when they were taking care of the garden, but then afterwards it needs a lot of effort on our part also to till it, to cultivate it, and to make a beautiful garden.
All right. And if someone, say, listening to our conversation, asks this question to themselves, where am I? And understands that they are not in the right place ecologically, or their relationship with the environment around themselves is not where it should be. What can people do in this case? Like, what are some practical ways to live out the message of Laudato Si?
So first of all, as you have said, no, answering sincerely the question, where are you, in terms of how you are living sustainable lifestyle, is very important. And from there, it would give you answers. It would give you answers because maybe we are not in the same place. Some people might be living already a sustainable lifestyle. Some would be not living maybe a sustainable lifestyle. So first of all, know where you are. Knowing where you are also means knowing your own resources, knowing what you can do. What can I do? Because, for example, I'm not an engineer, so I cannot immediately create technologies for non-renewable energies. But for example, I am always going to the market every week to buy food for my family, for my community. So the question is, so what can I do as someone who goes to the market that would help me live a more sustainable lifestyle? I see here in Lithuania, for example, I see that some people, they bring their own bags rather than asking or buying bags. Recycling, reusing things. Oh, the choice of products that we also buy, no, and that choice of packaging that these products have. So all of this, our choices, little it may seem, but they are already helping in living out as a more sustainable lifestyle. So go back, where are you? And from where you are, try to see your possibilities, try to see your strengths, try to see also your opportunities, and from there, do something. But not just think about it, but also do something about it. That's a problem. Sometimes for me, there's a disconnect. We have a lot of information about it, but the problem is we don't have a lot of willpower to do certain things. How many projects, for example, have we initiated? But at the end, they're just firework projects. What do I mean by that? They're just big projects. Photo here, photo there, maybe an article in the newspaper, and then after that, finish. Nothing. Clean up in the bay. Oh, very beautiful. All the students go there. No, I'm not saying that it's not good. It is good. But the question is, where is the sustainability there? Do we really have a long-term project for the bay, for example, for taking care of the water ecosystem? Or is it just, because it's Laudato Si week, let's do it? No, it's supposed to be a lifestyle. And I think that is where real conversion happens, when it becomes part of our life. And interesting, when it becomes part of our life, sometimes we would not be aware of it already because it's a second nature to us. For example, it's second nature for me not to throw plastics everywhere, or to not to use single-use plastic. I know, for example, someone will like going to kavine, not to coffee shop and all that. I know, for example, someone, a friend of mine, who would always go out with a cup of coffee, with a cup, so that when he goes to the coffee shop, he would just give the cup and they would just put the coffee in the cup. I know there are some initiatives here also, but how many really are responding to that? How many? Not too many. So I think we still have a long way to go in terms of that ecological conversion. But my advice is, don't be afraid to do it. And then along the way, you would see which would be more practical for you, which would be more relevant for you also and where you are living, and then just do it. Someone who lives beside the river would certainly do certain different things from someone who is living on the mountain. So where are you?
Okay, and for young people listening, for maybe students or young adults just out of university, what could you advise, for them to do? Have you seen any good examples maybe, or have you got any practical ways to suggest for them to live out this ecological conversion?
One of the good signs that I saw as a result of the Laudato Si 7 years ago, it was published. But what I saw, that the response of our young people, is very much positive, because they realize that they are the ones more affected by the ecological crisis and will be affected if they would not do something about it. So I'm happy to see that there are many groups, they're coming together, young people, in order to really take care of the environment. And they have a lot. For example, I, as a Salesian of Don Bosco, working with young people, I know that in our congregation, we have even an alliance of different groups around the world. We call it Don Bosco Green Alliance. Different groups from around the world that have commitments, resolutions as a group in order to take care of the environment. When I was in Telche, when I first came here in Lithuania, I was assigned in Telche. In Telche, we had a group. Of course, after the pandemic, it's dissolved already. But what I like is, the group's name is Wings of Don Bosco, and one of its objective is also to take care of the environment. And we became part of Don Bosco Green Alliance. And in that, Don Bosco Green Alliance, for you to become a member, would ask you three practical things to do. So, as a way of sharing, maybe I would just share what are the three things that we were resolved to do. So one is, and it's very interesting because this is a school-based youth group. One is because they saw that in the cafeteria, there's a lot of food wastage. So one of the resolution is to reduce food wastage, meaning they asked the ones operating the cafeteria not to give a pre-packaged meal, but really just to ask, how much do you need? The food. Because otherwise, you give them pre-packaged and it's supposed to be one scoop. But not everyone eats one scoop. Some people eats only half. So instead of throwing them out and then just eat, take what you can eat. Very practical. Even our home, we could do that. We just take what we can eat rather than we cook a lot for one part and then afterwards there's a lot of waste and we just throw them away. Second is to end the use of single-use plastics. So, for example, when we have celebrations, instead of using plastic cups, why not use metal or glass cups or biodegradable cups? Some would even use that, which could be reused, for example, as um, uh, pl- plant boxes. The plastic, the biodegradable cups could also be used as plant boxes. So that one, that the end of the use of the single-use plastic. And I think the third one is about an information drive. You see, it's not just about what you do, but also how you inform others. Information drive about how to recycle and to reuse things. So those simple resolutions taken by the group, I think could be an example. But I know that there are young people are more creative and innovative. They could they could have a lot of proposals, and my advice to them is, you know, do not be afraid to do it. Do not be afraid to do it. If it is wrong, and time would tell that is wrong. But if it is right, time would also tell that what you are doing is right. And if we dream of a better world, a more peaceful, a safer, a cleaner world, then that future world begins now. We have to act now. We are doing the podcast. This is a lot of talk, you know. But at the end of the day, after the talk, the real challenge is not just about speaking. Of course, speaking, discussion, dialogue is important. But at the end of the day, the fruits of all these conversations, this dialogue, should be felt and should be seen in the daily life that we live. So so to the young people out there, thank you first of all if you are already doing something for the environment, and a word of encouragement for those who are trying to start living a more sustainable lifestyle.
Okay, thank you. Well, I was going to ask you one more question about like final words of encouragement, but you just said it. So I think this is it. Unless you want to add something, because Lorenas will be able to put it in somewhere if you have any more thoughts.
Maybe an interesting thought. Let's go biblical.
Of course.
Something that could help us out as we um, start, or maybe as we continue on this journey of ecological conversion. It is interesting that the Bible begins with the book of Genesis and it talks about creation, and ends with the book of Revelation and talks about recreation, the new heavens and the new earth. And I think that is a good paradigm for us. The first creation, in a sense, was disrupted, was destroyed because of sin. And when we look into it, we realize that it is sin that breaks our relationship with nature. Okay? Maybe you would ask me, Father, would somebody go to confession and say, Father, I'm sorry because I threw a trash? No? I don't know. I haven't maybe heard so much about it. But if you would ask me, when we examine our conscience, where is the sin, ecological sin? They call it ecological sin. And that word has been taken also by the church. In the recent synod of the Amazons, they really define what an ecological sin is. No, it is a sin against the environment that has an effect on the environment and on the people living in that environment. So, ecological sin, if we look into the Ten Commandments, could be there roughly, could be in that part of the fifth commandment, which is you shall not kill, because it's about protection of life. And life doesn't just mean life of the human person. Life means living creatures. Life means the ecosystem. Ecology is living. Our world is alive. That is life. So to take care of the environment means to take care of life. Our life now and the future lives that will be in this world. And it could also be there because the root of most of the time, the root of our ecological crisis lies on the greed of man. No. On that commandment on you shall not steal and you shall not covet your neighbor's good. Those are two commandments that are intimately connected. That's why even in the catechism, they are discussed together most of the time. And I think we have to be careful of that as well. To examine, do we have charity or do we have greed in our hearts? Because if we have greed, even taking care of the environment would be very difficult because we only think of ourselves. We only think of what would be comfortable to us, what we like, no, without thinking of others. So those thing also. So when you have your examination of conscience, for example, you could very much use that as well. And going back, when Jesus came, what did he offered us? He offered us salvation. He came in order to renew the world. Because of sin, we die. And that's what the ecological crisis is bringing about. Death. Death to us and death to nature. But what does the good news bring to us? It brings us hope and it brings us life. Jesus is telling us, no, I came so that you could have another chance. I came so that you could chart a better future. I came so that you may be united once more with God, who is your creator. And so, in the Apocalypse, in the book of Revelation, you find there Jesus, after all the tribulations, when you read the Revelation, sometimes it creates a sense of fear, the wars, the famine, all this, the destruction of the world. But at the same time, you see that it gives us hope. When we look around us, there's so much destruction that is happening. No? But at the same time, the good news is God tells us, but in the end, God will triumph. No? That the new heavens and the new earth would be created. And that is the gift that God gives to us. But it is not just that He is there and He would suddenly by magic do it. No. He invites each one of us because we are Christians. That means we are Christ of the world, the salt and the light of the world. And whatever it is that we do should be helping also to establish this new heavens and the new earth. And the final question that I maybe would always leave the people, especially the young people, is to realize that we are here on this earth only once. We don't believe in reincarnation. And the question is, how would you like your life to be lived? And how would you like your life to be remembered? So, what is the world? What world would you like to leave behind? And I think that is the challenge for us, the younger generation. We have seen the problems of the past, and we are experiencing it now. So the question for us is, do we want still those problems to be, to be inherited by those that would come after us? Or would we like our generation to be that generation who would change, this paradigm, this cycle of this unending cycle of unsustainable lifestyle and hand over to future generations a better world? And I think if we are really sincere, our answer would be certainly we want to live a legacy of a world which is better than the one that we found ourselves in. But certainly this is very challenging.
It is. Okay. I think we can finish.
Yeah, I think we could finish. So maybe just to thank everyone, no? So first of all, Emilia, also thank you for for the question. Maybe since it's towards the end, I could be the one also to ask Emilia. So how about you, Emilia? No, how could you live a sustainable lifestyle? Or how are you living a sustainable lifestyle? It's not just how you would live, but maybe you are already living a sustainable lifestyle. So what are those small things? Because maybe our listeners also would gain something from your experience.
Well, I am trying my best, I guess. Just doing the little things like using a reusable water bottle always, and trying to recycle all the trash that we have at home. Because now, at least here in Vilnius, the recycling system is really, really, well done compared to what it used to be.
Tape.
And we do know that most of our trash gets recycled, at least here, around here. And then also, yes, trying to, reduce single-use everything, like all the cutlery and crockery and everything. I don't know, taking the public transport. Is that a big one? Yeah.
That's a big one. I was thinking about that because coming here for the podcast, I'm taking the public transport, and I said, see, even taking the public transport is a one way of helping and living a sustainable lifestyle. You see?
Exactly. Yes. Also, food waste that you mentioned, the young people in Telche doing, right? I really dislike food waste, so I always try to eat, my food, but also if some of my friends can't finish what they're eating, I will just eat their food. It's food. It's good, It's terrible if it goes to waste. So things like that, I think I'm trying to do. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing
no
also.
worries.
So, yeah. So hopefully, let's journey together in this ecological conversion, and with God's grace, which is always there, I know that we could have a better world.
Thank you, Father.
Ačiū jums.
Ačiū.